Okay, has that worked? Great, I can't see yours, I'm assuming it has. So I'm just going to flick us on to this slide here, which takes us through those stepping stones. And I think it's fair to say that when how this all began was through a process of very open discussions. In particular, from the fulfilling life side of things, we were having discussions with the department about a couple of key policies and wording within those policies and wanting to bring about change from those perspectives. But to some degree, we felt that we weren't getting very far. And bringing about policy change within local authorities is never easy, and it's quite a bureaucratic process. So I think there were some sort of challenges and frustrations on both sides where that line of work was almost on teetering on the edge of becoming more of a bureaucratic exercise than it was about creating inspirational change. So there was a time when we sort of pulled up as a team from Fulfilling Life side and said, you know, we're not sure this is going anywhere. What we really want to see are some of these bigger changes, and there to be a cultural shift, and for people to feel comfortable working with people who have complex needs, and for there to feel like there are supportive environments for everybody. And that led us on to sort of conversations more broadly about concepts of pie and how we might work differently. And what then emerged and built from those things was an agreement with the senior managers at Brighton Housing, Brighton and Housing Housing Department, that the Fulfilling Lives team would carry out a mystery shop. And our wonderful service user engagement team led on this particular exercise and an environment assessment of the customer service centre, for those of you who know it, in sort of Bart's House, to sort of share the experiences of what it's like to be somebody with complex needs in crisis going into those spaces. And the team worked up some scenarios building on learning of our clients and people's lived experience, and then went in and tested I suppose, the service and the system and how it responded to those individuals who were sort of role playing different scenarios. We then wrote up that feedback, shared it back, and the department was really open to that. And the managers and sort of heads of department wanted to hear that feedback. And we had roundtable discussions about it. We had broader discussions and sharing of learning with the whole department as well, where we were encouraged to be very open and honest about what went well during those mystery shops and environment assessments and what things could have been better, and where is it we were seeing perhaps trends in behaviours or trends in the way things were laid out and presented in buildings that weren't really working for people with multiple complex needs. So we had these really important debriefs and feedback spaces, and we know that that led on for the department to really think about their vision and their values and what they wanted to do. And at that time as well, I think they'd reached out to yourself, Peter, to start talking about pie and what that might mean for them as a department. And these conversations were happening, and we were sort of all brought round the table together, and that was facilitated by the department. They said, you know, we're having this conversation with Dr. Peter Cockersell about pie. Do you want to come along for Fulfilling Lives and share what you think too, and we can have a wider discussion. And then there was a decision within the department to roll out wholesale sort of pie training to every layer of the department, to all staff. And we were welcomed by Peter to join in with that designing of the training process and sort of feed in our views. And Peter and the team then took a lead on the sort of that training, and we came along for certain parts of that to talk about lived experience perspectives and what it might mean to work in a sort of networked way. After that, the sort of wholesale training that went through the whole department, so over 100 staff and all the management team, there were important debrief and feedback spaces as well that were opened up. And that informed the vision and strategy setting for the department. All of this happened in a context where there was increased demand on the customer service centre, sort of thinking about 2019 and how there were some real challenges there the department were grappling with. There were policy changes, there were new homelessness and housing strategies needing to be formed with quite short deadlines. And there was, however, that senior staff interest and appetite to look at things in a new way and an interest in pie. So they give some of the milestones, hopefully, to sort of the partnership and the journey we went on together. as a collaborative. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and just bring us back to have more of a conversation. So I think we're now going to move on to talk about and consider the impact this particular work and activity had and the key learning from these efforts. So Peter, would you like to start us off by sharing some reflections on the activity and impact?
Yeah. First of all, I'll just say a little bit for assuming everybody's familiar with PI, but in case anybody isn't familiar with PI, psychologically informed environments was an approach that was developed with what was then the Department of Communities and Local Government, is now the Ministry of Communities and Local Government, between a psychologist, a psychotherapist, myself. I was a director at St Mungo's at the time, social worker and a commissioner, and put together something which was specifically aimed at working with staff to enable and support staff to work with people who had experienced trauma who were in the homelessness system, because it was recognised that what led people into the homeless system and kept them in the homeless system, as well as behind mental health problems, drug addiction problems, and so on, was histories of compound trauma in the past. So that's where PI came from. And because I was involved in PI, that's how I got involved in this. And as Rebecca said, I was pulled in by Brighton Council, but then discovered that Rebecca and Fulfilling Lives were involved. And by weird thing, I was involved with Fulfilling Lives in another line anyway. So it seemed sensible to make this circle join up. So the first thing was great. It started off with discussions about practical approaches to working with people who have been impacted by trauma, with senior managers of Brighton Council and of Housing Department, and with experts by experience. So sitting down with a group of I say posh council people, important council people, and a group of experts by experience, and talking about this. And then out of this, we did a co-produced training. So that, I mean, the first impact really was to do that. It was something that was worked with the Housing Department and with experts by experience. And the new Homelessness Act was just coming into force. And one of the things that was driving Brighton was that they needed to change the way people were working to take account of the Homelessness Act. And to enable people to work with what was behind the homelessness and not just the fact of homelessness. Though having said that, Warren Larkin quoted from Bishop Tutu, or Archbishop Tutu, I should say, about we shouldn't spend all our time pulling people out of the river. We should work upstream and stop them falling in. Actually, the work of the Housing Department, the housing team, and most of the agencies that came to the trainings and most of the people involved with homelessness is actually pulling people out of the river. And the experts by experience are people who've been in the river, in the deep bit. And so it was really valuable. This is working with the impact of trauma and with the impact of the sort of social disadvantage, and how trauma and social disadvantage meet in a system which doesn't really provide either mental health support, physical support, financial support, or housing support. A really difficult system, basically. So the second impact was this co-produced training, and that was a fantastic thing. So it was delivered by either myself or my staff at CHT and experts by experience, with people at all levels, staff and managers from Brighton Housing and some associated agencies and some social workers, and people in different things in the evictions department and all sorts. It was really, really interesting, and it was really challenging and really straightforward, and lots of straightforward language used. People talked to each other, and some people found it really difficult at times on both sides. I think some of the meetings were quite heated, but there was a general enthusiasm to do something about it. They ended up with a general enthusiasm for PI, the enthusiasm for people to work together and across their different departments, and to work with between the local authority and the voluntary agencies. The enthusiasm to work with health, if health would actually talk to them, was really, really high. And I think one of the biggest, there are two big impacts I thought it had. A tremendous enthusiasm. The staff really want to do something about it. These are committed people, and it allowed them to be committed and to show that they're committed, that they wanted to do something about it. They had lots of ideas about how to do things better, and they worked really well with the experts by experience who were there in thinking about how they could take the learning from the mystery shopping and from the trainings itself and apply it. And it ended up with this big enthusiasm for a giant networking meeting in Brighton at Hove between all the between the housing department and all the voluntary agencies and health, if health would come along, so that they could actually talk about how they work together on the ground, and they could arrange that council workers were in, the housing workers were in voluntary sector teams came to housing meetings, how they could all work together, how they could talk to each other and have time to do it. It was, so the impact was great. And then there was this virus came along, and the networking event never happened, actually. So that's another whole story. But the impact was tremendous, I think. Just people talking to each other and the enthusiasm for getting things done.
Yeah. And I noted that during the training sessions as well, there was comments from staff really welcoming that space. And I hadn't anticipated that being as valuable a time as it was. I thought it would more be like the knowledge, or I've got the opportunity to actually spend a day with my colleagues away from perhaps that sense of the front line. But it was really interesting to see how people valued the space, and how debate was being generated between colleagues about certain topics. It was really lively, and I was really impressed by that experience. I think people left the day feeling very thoughtful and reflective. And I think that is a key component to how we make and encourage trauma-informed systems, is having space that encourages reflection and debate. So that has always stuck with me following on from this work. I mean, in terms of some of the other impacts I noted as well, Peter, was how the department as well has built in mention of PI into its sort of action plans, and PI principles are, the language of that is fed into their latest homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. And if I think about, Warren, what you were saying about, those governance foundations, I feel that some of this has filtered down. And for example, with the strategy, there is a clear public commitment to the principle of partnership working. And it says we will work in collaboration with all services and agencies providing services and support around homelessness prevention, intervention and sustainability. And it talks as well about co-producing services to address homelessness. And I was really pleased to see that, how it got translated into some of those governance frameworks. Were there any other sort of key learnings and reflections from yourself and the team, Peter, following on from this sort of collaboration?
Just some thoughts about developing a trauma-informed system, I think, going into the future. This is echoing some of the things that Warren said this morning, which was really good. For those of you who were given the wrong instructions, it is recorded, as somebody pointed out, and that is really important because Warren's talk was great and well worth watching. But what we measure is incredibly important, and the role of senior managers is really important. And I think one of the things that often doesn't happen is any training or support for senior managers in how to manage a trauma-informed service. And so PI, I've been involved with PI for a decade or so now, but it's very often the trauma-informed approaches of any sort are seen as something that the frontline staff need to know about and need to do, possibly the frontline managers, but not the senior managers or the finance department or HR department need to know about. And that's absolutely not true, because there's a different way of managing trauma-informed services, and you have to manage it differently to enable the staff to do it. And the staff, you'll get solutions if you allow the staff to do what they know best and talk to other staff inside and outside their own agency and do real good networking at ground level. But you have to enable that and you have to support that. And so I think for senior managers, providing the staff support, Warren mentioned it, supervision, Most organisations have supervision structures. They don't happen. You talk to the frontline staff, they don't get regular, supportive, reflective supervision. They don't have time for breaks. They don't have time to think. They need training, supervision, reflective practice groups. Space every week needs to be provided for reflective practice. They need time to work with individuals, and they need to be allowed to work with individuals over a period of time. The Fulfilling Lives national programme, one of the key findings from that, I think, is the impact of people spending time with their clients, and how that works. Person-centered, so rather than being a service that is designed, you do this, you do that, you do the other, and the person has to take it or leave it, which is the health service approach and most large organisations approach. We deliver it like this, love it or lump it. No, it has to be tailored to an individual, because each individual's history is different and each individual's circumstance is different. And it should be results oriented, not in the sense of throughput. We worked with 40 people this week and we only did it 5 minutes each, and that's wonderful, because that's totally the wrong approach. But results oriented in the how can we help? What actually delivers something useful? And we spent a lot of time in the training talking about this between the experts and between the housing staff. How can we deliver something useful? So if somebody comes in, they need some help right now, and how can you do something that is useful to them? So having that how can we help approach, and that from a commissioner's point of view, it needs to be commissioned in time for staff to work, not the minimum number of staff with the maximum caseload you can get away with approach, but approach of time and to do things, and not micromanaging things, saying that they must do this and they must do 12 of those and 6 of those and 5 of them, and it takes 5 minutes each. Again, say they work with the client and allowing staff to use their own judgment, because the knowledge and skills of the staff is tremendous. Allowing them to use their own judgment and to network and to find solutions between themselves and between them and the other agencies that they work with. Those are the things that commissioners and senior managers need to take on. And then the staff need to be given the space to get out of their offices. The psychologists are no use in clinics. Secondary healthcare, mental health care is even worse than primary mental health care. It's useless. Get them out into the homelessness centres, get them into day centres, get them where people are. Not everybody wants psychotherapy, but they should have access to it, and that means it should be where they are. So those are a few things I think would change the system.
Yeah. I asked one of our volunteers, or my colleague did, who had taken part in the whole process of some of his reflections. So I'm just going to share a slide, if that's okay. And he felt comfortable sharing his view in writing. So hopefully this works and you can all see this. We asked, what were his reflections on the experience and maybe some of the takeaway sort of memories from it. And he says, so my interest in the work was to do with the fact that the first time I was homeless, I went through the system and it was decided that they had no duty of care. So I just wanted to see if the system had changed or not. I do think that the majority of the staff at the council were very open-minded. The few staff members who did object at first did eventually come round after we managed to convince them that the work was about testing the system and not them. I don't know about all the staff, but I do remember one lady who said that as a result of the mystery shops, that she had reevaluated the way she worked, and that after it, when she was meeting with people, she made sure she had some water and tissues in case they were needed. I just thought they were really nice reflections, and how one of our volunteers really touched by somebody having space to reflect, share that directly with them, and has made some sort of small practical changes that have been influenced by the work that's been going on. So yeah, I was really grateful that he felt comfortable sharing those.